Hi everyone. I've had so many people reach out to me and ask, how do I get started in project management? Or if they're running a project or running a change, what steps do they have to go through to make sure that they are successful in making that change and running that project? Sometimes it can get overwhelming and there's so much information out there. So I've created the Project Management Success Steps, which is really just a series of steps, or call it a checklist of steps, if you will, so that we can just go through and check all of these things off. And if we're doing all of these things, then really we're going to have success as a project manager. Project management is already hard enough, and so hopefully we're simplifying it and making it a little bit easier. Now, as we go through these steps at a high level, we can start from top to bottom, and here are the broad steps. So first of all, we've got general project management, where we're planning all the hidden project tasks at the beginning to make sure that each piece is working together. Then we want to gather our stakeholders and make sure that we've got the right people involved. And we start with that because stakeholders are everything. We want to be gathering requirements from our stakeholders, and that's our next step, eliciting the requirements of our project. What do we need to do? What do our customers need? Then we create the scope and manage the scope from those requirements. So that's next in line. Now, once we've got our scope, we can start putting those into activities and putting that on a schedule. So we've got the scope. When are we going to be delivering those things? And once we've got that, we've got a few other things, and these can be done sort of in any order or even over and over in an iterative approach. But once we've got the schedule, we can start looking at how much all of that is going to cost to deliver. How much time is it going to take? How many resources will we need? And what's the quality approach that we need to take for delivering that scope? So as you can see, step by step, it's just pretty straightforward when we get down to it. Now, if we're working with a vendor, then we're going to need to plan procurements, and there are various steps in there. For everyone on our project, we want to be planning the communications and make sure that we're communicating with the right people at the right times. And of course, risk, making sure that we're taking care of anything that might be coming up in the future that will put our project at risk or our product at risk. And once we've finished everything, we want to transition all of that into BAU, business as usual, or operations. And that's something that's gaining more traction these days as organizational change management. So broadly, those are 12 steps that we know that we need to do as project managers as we're going along on our project. But there's even more to it than that, because each of those steps has a bunch of things that we can tick off to make sure that we're really getting the best output for our project. And we're going to go through each of those steps now so you can have success as a project manager. The first area we're going in is just planning our project overall. And there's a few things that we need to do to set up our project in the right way. And the very first thing is to start with a business case. This is the pros and cons, or the why behind our project. So why are we doing our project? It starts with the summary of the opportunity or the problem. So why, what's the change that we need to make and why? An outline of the current situation, an outline of the solution options. So with the cost and benefit of those options, maybe some are better than others. And then we make our recommendation. So what change do we absolutely or do we actually need to make? And here's an example of a project business case that you can use just as a template on your own projects. Now, a lot of people don't even get this step right, and so they never really understand why they're doing the project in the first place. And then it's hard to keep our team engaged because everyone's saying, well, why are we doing this in the first place? So this is a great way to start. Very, very important. Next most important is the project charter. This is something that we use to kick off our project and to get the resources that we need and the funding that we need to make our project go. To do that, basically we take this project charter and all of the information, and we take that to the project sponsor who's in charge of the funding or the resources, and they sign off on it, and they give us the go-ahead to use those funding and resources and to start our project. So we need things like our key stakeholders involved, the project purpose and benefits, the high-level requirements that we're wanting to be delivering on, the estimated cost, just a high-level estimated cost, a high-level schedule or summary milestones that we might have. And remember, we haven't planned out our project totally yet. This is just a high-level idea, as much as we can get in a short amount of time. the project resources that we're going to need to perform our project, and any high-level risks that we can already see on the horizon. And again, here are some beautiful templates just of a project charter, getting agreement to initiate our project. Now, in between here, there is a step, and what we want to say is, has a project sponsor approved the funding and the resources? And this is a very important step. Some people skip or miss this step, and it's happened to me in my own career where I've said that something is really good and we want to make this change. However, I didn't have access to the resources that I needed, and I didn't have access to the funding that I needed. And so ultimately the project failed and didn't get the result that I needed. And that's because we really need someone to say, yes, it's okay to go ahead and use these things, and here is the resources and here is the funding. So get that sign off. Now, there are a few other little plans that we can do when we're planning out our project. And the next one is the change management plan, or the change control plan. And we need this to start planning out how are changes managed on this project. What if we need to change the scope, or the schedule, or the cost, if any of those things are significantly different to the way we had planned? And these are different in Agile and Waterfall, and we can plan them out either way. So Agile, a product owner will reprioritize the backlog of features that they want to deliver. In Waterfall, we want to create change requests that are analyzed for their impact to the project and taken to the change control board. So there's many different ways to do this, but we just have to agree with our team and plan this out. So we want to look at the items that are subject to change control, the roles and responsibilities, including the change control board, and that could just be the project manager, or it could be the project sponsor, or it could be a few executives in the business included, so depending on the organization. Any change analysis required, and who approves those changes when we need to make them. Now, when we've got that, we also want to create our benefits management plan. We want to start with the end in mind. What are the benefits that we're delivering for this project, and how are we going to measure them once the project is complete to prove that we actually delivered business value? So we want the target benefits, their strategic alignment with the company's strategy, the time frame that we want to realize them in, the benefits owner, who's measuring it, any assumptions that we've made, the metrics that we are measuring, and any risks to those benefits that we might see. So that's a really good way to get started on our project. And once we've got all of those bits and pieces, we can actually create the project management plan itself. And in that project management plan, we're going to put all of these next bits that we're going to go through. All of those bits and bobs make up our overall project management plan that we use to manage our project. So once we've put all of those basic bits and pieces together and started planning our project in the right way, we can start gathering our stakeholders. And this is so important because stakeholders have all of the information that we need, and we also need stakeholders and people to do the things on our project to get it done. So let's look at gathering and managing stakeholders. Our first one, creating or reviewing the stakeholder engagement plan. This is just the process for how we're going to engage and manage our stakeholders. It might include things like how we're going to gather our stakeholders. Is it an organizational breakdown structure in the organization that we can just go to and find the people that we need? Do we need to hire externally? All these sorts of things. How we will classify our stakeholders, and we'll go into this in a bit more detail later on. Using a communication styles assessment, or using a stakeholder engagement assessment. So all of these things are in the project management plan templates, but these are ideas of what they look like. Once we've got that, we want to fill out that stakeholder register. So create it and fill it out, and we can use the existing organizational breakdown chart. So usually there's a list of people, maybe it's a nice visual in the organization where everybody fits. We can go searching through that to find the right people in the right areas for our project if we need to. We'll include things like our name, their name, the role and responsibility, their classification, so the impact that we're having on their area, and the influence that they have on our project. So if both of those things are high, then we really need to engage with them quite a lot, and any other information that we really want. Now, once we've got that, we can classify those stakeholders, and often by impact and influence. So we've got the list of people, we classify them so that we know who to engage with and how often. Now we're moving down the list, we've got the stakeholders that we need, and now we can start gathering and eliciting the requirements of the project, usually from a lot of those stakeholders that we've just gathered. So the first thing we're going to do is create and agree on the requirements management process. So what is the process we're going to go through to manage requirements? We might include roles and responsibilities. Who's responsible for these things? The method that we'll use, is it meetings? Are we all putting it in a requirements document? What does it look like? How are we prioritizing requirements? And the acceptance criteria structure. So there's a few different ways to do this. Maybe it's the actor and the goal and then the steps, so a use case. Or maybe it's given, when, then, like behavior-driven development. Maybe it's test-driven development. Or maybe it's just a prototype or a mock-up of the new thing that we need or the requirements. Many different ways to do it. And here's an example of our wonderful requirements management plan. And once we've got that, we want to gather the customer requirements or elicit them from the users or the people where we're gathering those requirements from. Could be our project sponsor who's in charge, could be customers, could be senior users, could be anyone. And we've got that from our stakeholder register, which is why we did that first. Then we want to prioritize those requirements. Which ones are the most important requirements and which ones are not that important? So if we don't do those, then maybe that's not that bad. And we can prioritize them in many different ways. Moscow, which is must have, should have, could have, would have, or will not have, sorry. We could do it by the cost of delay. We could do it with a prioritization matrix, many different ways, and all of those will be included in your requirements management plan. Now, once we've got that, we want to create the requirements traceability matrix. And we do that because we need to track the requirement and who requested it, its priority, and then what scope or deliverable is actually meeting that requirement. And then once we've delivered that scope or deliverable, then what's the test case? And have we tested it? Have we quality tested it correctly? And who is it currently assigned to? And is it complete? So we're tracking those requirements all the way from their requirement all the way to their delivery and making sure that we're meeting the needs of our project. Very important and really good stuff. All of these things have a great importance, and so each step in its own way is important. Now that we've gathered the requirements, we want to figure out the scope that we need to meet those requirements. So let's get into this process. Creating and agreeing on the scope management process, which is how are we going to manage scope? What's the process for scope baseline creation, which is just our list of deliverables that are approved and ready to go? What's the definition of ready and what's the definition of done on our project? So when something is ready to be worked on and when something is ready to be accepted by our customer. Our next step in scope is to create the scope statement, which is just a high-level description of the scope. So we're starting high level and we're going to be breaking this down into more and more detailed deliverables until we get to the level where someone can actually work on it and complete it. So the high-level deliverables or the features list is also something we'll create here, and any exclusions. So just a high-level features list is how we start. Once we've got that high-level features list, then we can prioritize those as well. So we might have some deliverables, they're meeting all of our requirements, and these are the ones at the top that we really need to deliver first because they're the highest priority. Many different ways to prioritize as well. Multi-criteria decision analysis, voting, Moscow, cost of delay, weighted shortest job first, cost or benefit, value or effort, impact, confidence, and ease, many different ways. None of them are wrong, it's just what we decide as a team that we're going to use. And once we agree, then let's do it that way. So then we've got that high-level list, we can create the work breakdown structure. And again, this is a beautiful, nice template that will go into your scope management plan, starting with the high-level idea, the high-level features, we might have lots of these features, and then breaking that down into smaller and smaller items. Now this can be smaller deliverables, or it can be the tasks that we're doing to create those deliverables. It depends on the way that you want to manage your team, and that's why we need to plan our management strategies as we're going along. So once we've got that work breakdown structure, which is breaking down the work, then we can create our WBS dictionary. This is the work breakdown structure, but with a whole bunch of extra information, like the resources required, the cost of the item, the time, how long it's going to take to deliver, any dependencies. And so all of those things, now we're starting to add those attributes to the deliverables that we're going to deliver. As you can see, we're fleshing out our plan and how much things are going to cost and how long they're going to take. So now that we've got all of our scope managed, then what we want to do is start putting that on a schedule. How long is that scope going to take to deliver? And the first thing we do there is plan out our process, as you know. So we're planning out how we're going to manage our schedule. Process for creating the baseline, which is our schedule locked in a moment in time, and any changes need to go through change requests or change control. Process for maintaining that baseline, and any high-level milestones that we might have listed out here. And it depends on how you want to show those. This is just another example of our schedule management plan. Once we've got that, we have our deliverables and we turn those into a project activity list. So what are the activities that we need to do to create this deliverable? So we're breaking down the work even further. And again, here is the duration of those items. So very, very handy information to have. We can do estimating techniques to create these schedule durations. So how long is it going to take? There's many different estimation techniques that we can use. Bottom-up estimation, parametric estimation, analogous, wideband, 3-point estimation. You'll need a proper project management course for that, but those are the things that we can put in our project management plan that you want to be aware of. Now that we've got those activities, we want to put them in the right sequence. So as you can see, everything is just flowing. It's just a wonderful step-by-step. It makes sense, the flow that we're going in. So now that we've got those activities, we want to put them, when do we need to do them? We can't close the project at the very beginning of the project, can we? So we need to do this step, then this step, then this step. And we usually do this with a schedule network diagram, which is basically just the activities in the right sequence or order. And once we've got that, we can create our project schedule, which usually looks like a Gantt chart, if you've seen one of those before. The deliverables and the tasks just put to a project calendar. All right, wonderful stuff. Now that we've got that, we want to manage the cost. So how do we figure out the cost on our project, and how do we keep the cost under control? The first thing we want to do is plan our cost management process. Who's responsible for what? How do we create our cost baseline? What's the process? And how do we get the estimates for cost on our project? And again, beautiful templates that you can use. So cost management plan, the purpose of this document, and all of these things that we'll include in our cost management plan just as nice prompts so that you don't forget. Once we've planned out our process, we want to estimate the costs themselves. Again, we can use those estimating techniques, the same ones, with our team, analogous, parametric, bottom-up estimating, many different wonderful ways to do it. And that's a nice prompt for us so that we remember all those different ways. And we aggregate all of those costs. So here's our deliverable. Here's the work package. So we've broken it down to the work package that someone can actually work on. And then we've estimated that cost. And then we've got all of that cost together. And there's the total. So now we're starting to get a good idea on how much our overall project is going to cost. Really, really cool. All right, now once we've got that rough idea, we want to add a few things: contingency reserves and management reserves. We don't have to add these. Every organization will be different. But if we're going to, it's just a good prompt. So just in case. For any known risks, we might need an extra amount of dollars, and for any unforeseen scope, we might need an extra amount of dollars just in reserve in case we need it. And once we've put all of those things together, we've got our overall budget. And just a quick note, in Agile, we're going to have a fixed budget because we have a fixed team. And so what we do there is we have a variable scope. The scope might change, but the cost is going to be the same no matter what. So we don't change that. And then we just vary the scope as we go along to meet the same cost. With Waterfall, If we change our cost, we need to go through the change request or the change control process, like we planned all the way at the beginning. Exactly. So pretty cool. As you're seeing, it's starting to come together. This is just, now you're starting to plan out your project and you're starting to have things under control just because you've planned it in the right way. Now we really want to check the quality of our deliverables. So that's a very important thing. With quality management, we want to plan out our quality management process. How are we going to manage quality on our project? So what's the strategy? How do we manage defects? What are the definitions of quality? Defect definitions, severity 1, severity 2. What are these definitions? Let's make it clear for everyone. And what's the scope of testing and quality assurance? And once we've got that, we want to create the test and inspection plan. So depending if it's a physical item or if it's a software item, it's still, the idea is the same. We want quality assurance. We want to check and test that those deliverables are up to standard, up to the customer's standard. In software, we might use test cases, so unit testing, system testing, integration testing. If we're using a physical product, we might statistically sample the deliverables and just check every 5th one, for example, or every 100th item, depending on what we're delivering. So either way, this is quality assurance. Now, as we go along planning our project, we also want to plan the resources. So who do we need and what do we need in order to get our project done? And the first thing we do, surprise, surprise, we want to plan out our resource management process. So how are we going to manage the resources? Let's just create a strategy for this. And we can include things like the team resources, the physical resources or materials, team roles and responsibilities, the team way of working, team charter, any team assessments, growth and improvement strategies, and the team calendar and their ways of working, their working days and working hours. So all very important information to have in our plan. So what we're going to do first, after that, is estimate the resources that we need. And we're estimating this because we don't know for sure when we hit the real world and we start delivering, things might change, and often they do. And that's why project management can be really challenging, but it can be made easier with the right plan. And so we want to use these estimating techniques again to estimate the resources that we're going to need. So get really good at these estimating techniques because they will really, really help you for cost, schedule, and resources. Once we've estimated those resources that we need, we want to create the resource breakdown structure, which is basically visualizing our project team. Who do we need and where do they fit in the project structure? Now, this helps us understand where maybe there's a leader of the business analysts, and so then we've got those business analysts in that team. Maybe we've got developers, and maybe we've got construction, or maybe we've got people doing plastering, painting, maybe there's other things, framing, and then concreting, and all of those things we need to know where they fit and how they fit within our project. So this is just going to be a great way that we can refer to this in the future as we need to understand where everyone fits in our project. Then we need to create our responsibility assignment matrix. We've got all the people, but what do they do? This is where we plan that out. It's our RACI, or responsible, accountable, consulted, who we need to consult for an item, and who needs to be informed on an item. So here's our task or deliverable, and here's the person and their role, and they're responsible for that task. Maybe this task over here, maybe this person is responsible for that particular task. And this is just a great way to understand what everyone is doing on our project. Then we also want to create our resource calendar. And this is important because what if we're working in an area that actually has a holiday for the whole of October? Now, I know that may not happen, but it could, and we need to know about it. So let's say our working hours are cut off and we're not able to deliver anything during this time. We just need to make sure that we're all on the same page, and we put this in our resource plan because this will affect our resources and the delivery of our project. And then we've got resource management, creating and agreeing on our way of work with our team. So our team comes together and we create our team charter, our roles and responsibilities, who we're going to work with, the team values. So is it a transparency? Is it always being on time? Is it different ways of conflict management, different ways of making decisions? We want to plan that out. Any meetings, regular meetings or team ceremonies, and how do we communicate as a team? All of those things, good to get on the same page with our team. All right, we're really getting through this. Amazing work. So planning procurements, this is if we've got third-party vendors. And look, to be honest, there's a lot to do here. It's quite a huge part of our project. So if you've got vendors, just know that it's going to be more complicated usually because we're going to have to go through all these steps. So creating our procurement process, as always, just the process and the roles and responsibilities for managing the vendor and managing procurement. Now then, we really want to do a make or buy analysis. Is it actually better to make the item, or is it better for us to buy the item? And we want to look at ongoing costs as well as the initial costs, and maybe over time. For example, here, the costs to make it is less initially, but over time it becomes more because our costs are more as a business, but they would be less buying it from the third party. So that's something to consider, and we want to put all of that in our make or buy analysis. Then if we're really going ahead with a third-party vendor, we need to create a statement of work. So what is the vendor needing to deliver? Maybe it's we can use the work packages that we created before, and maybe we need them for half of those. Maybe we're able to deliver the rest of them. So what are those things? That's our statement of work. What do they need to deliver for our vendor? And once we've got that, then we can do these things around procurement management. Create the source selection criteria. So this is the criteria that we're going to use to choose our vendor. Maybe it's cost, maybe it's the time frame that we need to deliver it in, maybe it's their experience, maybe it's their branding, who knows what it is. Maybe it's because they're our friend. We've got a friend in that organization. But ideally, we want it to be based on something solid like cost and schedule and whether they can actually deliver the item. Then we want to find independent cost estimates out there, maybe from commercial databases out there in the world or other quotes to use as a benchmark, just to see if the quotes that we receive from our vendors are on the right track or if they're on the same page. Then we find any pre-qualified sellers within our business. Maybe in our business we have a list of sellers that we already work with and we're happy to work with those, and we have to work with those maybe because they're pre-approved. So they're already used in the organization. We need to find that list just in case. And if it doesn't exist, that's fine, but we need to check. Then use advertising or bidder conferences. So we need to advertise the opportunity out there to find new vendors. Once we've got all of that put together, we need to create the bid document. So we send that out to our vendor. Do we need a request for information? Do we need information on what they can do? A request for quote. So is it just a quote on the price? So how much it's going to cost? Or a request for proposal. Do we need them to propose a solution to us and how much that might cost? So these are the different documents, and then they'll come back with that information and that cost. Then we can create our contract and sign that with the vendor and proceed. And that's all of the items with procurement. As we go through all of those steps, we're going to need to communicate with everyone, even if they're a vendor or if they're internal to our organization. We're still going to need to communicate and plan that communication with those people. So how do we create that? First is our communication management plan. We just create our strategy for how we're going to communicate. What are we going to communicate? Who are we going to communicate to? Why are we communicating that information? And how are we communicating that information and how often? So all of that stuff, pretty straightforward when you know it, but this is a nice prompt so that we really do it. So we can put that in our stakeholder communication needs so that they're getting the right information at the right times. And also a good thing to do is the communication styles assessment. If we've got all of our list of stakeholders, maybe some of them prefer meetings, maybe some of them prefer emails, maybe some of them prefer messages, maybe some of them prefer reports, whatever these things are, let's get their preferences so that we're communicating to them in the way that is best for them. So, and maybe we can't meet all of their needs, but it's good to be aware of those things. Very, very important. Now we're getting to the end and we've just got risk and operations. So this is really, really good. Risk is all the way through our project from start to finish. We always need to be aware of risk. So we're sort of doing this all the time. But the first thing we need to do is create our risk management process, of course. Who's responsible for managing risk? The overall risk strategy, any risk categories, and we've got these here. These are really, really great. So maybe we've got technical risks, management risks, and in our organization, we might have existing lists of risks that we can just take from and use to brainstorm on our own project. So this is good to be aware of. It's a risk breakdown structure. Risk definitions. So what does a high risk look like? And we categorize those risks by, and I think I've got it here, but it should be in here as a step. We categorize it by likelihood and the impact of the risk. And so with that, we're like, what does a high likelihood mean? Maybe it happens every hour. And then a low likelihood might be once a year. Just as an example, we want to define all of those things so that it's really clear for our stakeholders and for us. So once we've got that plan, we can create the risk register, which is our list of risks, brainstorming those risks with our team, and then we classify them by likelihood and impact. How likely are they to happen, and what's the impact if they do happen? And obviously, the highest, most critical risks, as you can see, have a high impact and a high likelihood. With those risks, they are going to need risk responses. How are we going to respond if they happen? Do we have risk controls or mitigations in place that we can do? And do we have people who own these risks who are going to perform those risk responses? So we need to plan that out with our team. Now, lastly, when we've done all of those things and we've delivered all of those items and we've made sure that they're signed off by the person and the customer and they're all happy with all of those things that we have delivered as a project, then we can transition this to operations. And this is what you'll see as organizational change management. Basically, this is transitioning to business as usual. We're going to need things in our plan like the signed sponsor support. We need them to support the change. Roles and responsibilities, maybe change champions, the completed change details, our change delta, they call it, change readiness assessment, so we can check this out in person or do a survey, the communication, training, and warranty support strategies as needed. And then there's a few different change management methodologies like ADKAR or the William Bridges model. Both of those are really good from a change management perspective, and they could probably have a course on their own. But in the project management professional course or the PMP course that I run, we do have that information in there. And it's quite a nice way to manage a change. But at a high level, what we want to be doing is creating the documentation. Maybe there's a process change, or there's training, or there's communication for the transition. So we want to be communicating, training, and creating the right processes and documentation for that change so that we can get that into operations and business as usual. And there you have it. Those are all of the steps that you go through to plan and to manage out your project. And now that you've got that as a checklist, you can go through those and have the right amount of success on your very own project. Go forth into the world and do amazing things, create some business value, and create wonderful, wonderful changes using these skills and using this step-by-step process. I wish you the absolute best, and I will see you in the next video.